Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen, an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa. I present these videos weekly for a twofold purpose, the first of which is to help move my brain out of the mode of pondering and working with the text throughout the course of the week into what I call sermonation mode as I actually write and prepare the sermon that I will preach to my congregation for the weekend. And the second reason for making these videos is just to allow you, the viewer, who have stumbled across this video for whatever reason, to gain different insight into the text for the week. This particular Sunday, which is October 25th, 2015, Reformation Sunday, the gospel text comes out of John chapter 8, verses 31 through 36. Now, this happens to be the assigned text every year for Reformation Sunday. So we've had this one before. I've actually done a video on this particular text before. It was Sermon Braindump episode 21, so you can certainly pop back and look at that one if you want to try and gain insight from a year ago as to where we were at. The interesting thing about Reformation Sunday is it is always the final Sunday of October, which is, of course, the closest to October 31st, which was the day when Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the chapel at Wittenberg University over in Germany, which sparked the beginning of the Reformation almost 500 years ago, back in the year 1517. So we're at the 498th anniversary of that, coming right up here in about a week. So, this Sunday is Reformation Sunday when we celebrate that. It also is the 23rd, let me look, 22nd Sunday after Pentecost. And if for some different congregations will go with that mode, and the assigned text for that is actually it's out of Mark 10, the end of Mark 10, as Jesus encounters blind Bartimaeus and heals him on his way into Jerusalem. However, that's not the text that we're using. We're going to go with John because here in the Lutheran Church, of course, we are very Reformation-minded. So that's what we're going with. All that being said, let's jump in here. So John chapter 8, 31 through 36. Now, interestingly enough, in the lectionary, the only time John 8 at all, and actually John 7 is touched upon, is Reformation Sunday, and it's just this little portion. And it's interesting because John 7 and 8 are both pretty confrontational in terms of what's going on. There's a lot of pretty harsh debate between Jesus and his opponents within John's gospel. Most oftentimes it's called the opponents of Jesus are called the Jews, or in Greek it's the Judei. But it's interesting to note, or it's important to note, that it's not all of the Jews, it's not all of the Jewish people. Jesus had many followers, many people who agreed with him, many people who were probably just indifferent to him. But his main opponents tended to be the religious leaders, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. They're the ones who tend to battle against or debate the harshest with Jesus. And why? Well, perhaps because he threatens their authority. He threatens their power. He threatens their status. Jesus came to turn reality on its ear because reality is so flawed by the presence of sin in the world, the presence of darkness, the presence of evil, whatever you want to call it. And within John's gospel, evil is a very present thing that we hear that Satan is active. Satan causes Judas to betray Jesus, and there's a lot of that going on. John of the four Gospels is, of course, the one that probably encounters spiritual warfare the harshest. Of course, it's not the only one. In Mark, we've heard a lot about demons and possessions and things of that nature. We hear about it in Matthew and Luke as well. But John is very strong in the terms of the powers of light and dark, and that's a theme that, if you've heard me talk about John before, you've probably heard me talk about light and dark, and the notion of the light shines in the darkness, which comes out of John 1. But so that's all been going on. And here in John chapter 8, Jesus is in Jerusalem. We hear that he's here for a festival. We don't think it's Passover. It's actually the Festival of Booths, which is another important Jewish festival in which the people camp out for, I forget how long it is. I want to say it's about a week, but it may be longer than that. And it's something that they do in remembrance of their time in the desert, wandering in the desert with Moses prior to coming into the Promised Land, way back in Exodus history, um, and sorry, I lost my train of thought for just a second there. So, but it's an important festival, and of course, there's a lot of people in Jerusalem because that is the central place of worship. That's an important aspect of Jewish culture, Jewish heritage at the time, and so that's why Jesus is here. And so everything that he's doing here happens in the temple. All of this. Now he's there. He's teaching. He's preaching. He's proclaiming. He's butting heads, which is pretty typical when he's in Jerusalem. And we hear exactly one verse before this passage starts that as he was saying all of these things, and it's been a lot. As he was saying these things, many believed in him. Now, that's a very important statement because it highlights basically the opposite of what is sin in John's gospel. Sin in John's gospel, you probably heard me say this before, is not believing that Jesus is God. Throughout the course of this gospel, we constantly hear Jesus saying, I am. He calls himself I am. He says, before this happened, I am he. Ego eimi is the Greek equivalent, and it points at I am, which is what God told Moses to call him. So I am is God. We hear that a lot, and so again, sin in John's gospel is not believing that Jesus is God, not believing that he is who he says he is, not believing the promises that he's making, not believing Jesus. That's sin. So we hear directly before this, many Jews believed in him. Or many of these people that were listening believed in him. Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, if you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are descendants of Abraham and have never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean by saying you will be made free? Jesus answered them, very truly I tell you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not have a permanent place in the household. The son has a place there forever. So if the son makes you free, you will be free indeed. Okay, so that's the very short, only 5 or 6 verses, the actual gospel lesson for Reformation Sunday, and it speaks to that. Now, in terms of the chapter itself, a lot happens. Now, as I mentioned, these people listening, some of them believe what he has to say, so they become believers. So they have this is important because that's the whole point of why Jesus came and why John's gospel was written in the first place, so that you may come to believe. So Jesus says these things, and instantly they trip up because he says, continue in my word. The word, it says, if you continue in my word, that's meno, Greek word that means abide. Abide in my word, live in my word, continue to be in my word. And you will be my disciples, and you will know the truth, and truth will set you free. That right there trips them up. And we hear we're sons of Abraham. We have never been slaves to anyone. Yeah, you have. They forget their history real quick, apparently. They were slaves in Egypt. They are subject to different empires who have come in and taken them over, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and when they were hauled off in exile, now they're subject to the Romans. Yeah, you guys have been slaves. So it's like, wake up. And what Jesus is saying here is your heritage does not set you free. And that's perhaps what they're relying on. The Jewish people, of course, hold on to their tradition and hold on to their status as a culture very strong as the chosen people of God. And that's important, going all the way back to Abraham and the promise made to Abraham that by God, I will make of you a great nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through you. And that's true because Jesus comes from the Jewish culture. And Jesus blesses the entire world. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son. But their status as Jewish people alone, as God's chosen people, does not save them. It does not guarantee their saved status, and that's what Jesus came to say and to do, to heal that breach, to make relationship possible. What the gospel tells us, that nothing that we do or say or are can earn us salvation, or nothing that no status gets us there. Only Jesus gets us there. So anyway, so this trips them up, and they start to bicker, and they go back and forth. And these people who have believed almost instantly fall right back away from it. And as the chapter continues, they bicker, they fight with Jesus, they go back and forth, they accuse him of having a demon and being possessed. He tells them that their father is the devil, and he's the father of lies, and they've believed his lies. They get very confrontational. Jesus gets kind of rude. They get rude right back. It goes back and forth, and we see this roller coaster of living in the notion of, I'm set by my status, I'm set by my heritage, and then believing in Jesus. Oh, holy cow, Jesus is God. This man is God, and he's here for us. But then that truth points out the reality that they can't handle, and they fall back away right again. And how often do we get caught in that same crazy cycle? We've seen it throughout the history of the scripture. If you've caught some of my other videos, not my sermon brain dumps, but we're doing a study within my congregation called The Story, as we look at the biblical narrative, and we see, particularly through the Old Testament, but as we get in the New Testament, it's more of the same. This crazy cycle of the people follow God and everything goes well, and then they kind of fall away because their leadership suffers or their faith suffers or whatever, and things go badly, and they remember God and they pray to God, and God blesses them again, and it goes around and around and around and around. And it continues because we can't do it. No matter how hard we try, no matter how good of our intentions are, sin, the presence of evil, that which separates us from God and warps our reality, is dug in too deep. It's part of us. It's part of our nature, and not just that, but all of our reality has been twisted by it. The powers of sin, the power of darkness in the world, and the result of that is death. And that's what God entered into our reality as a person, as Jesus, fully God, fully man at the same time. And yes, that's mind blowing, and we don't get how it works, but we believe it. And in order to do something about it, and it's only through Jesus that this is made possible. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except me. That is Jesus' mission, to bring that relationship between us as individuals and God back into balance, and overcoming the wages of sin, which is death, the result of sin, which is death, to overcome that. Now, I was actually talking with my family about this last night, and just that discussion really sparked off the notion of where I think I'm going with the sermon on this one, is that the gospel is not about how there's this list of rules and you have to do this and you have to do this and have to do this and have to avoid this and not do this and not do this, and then you're okay. And it's not that God is this angry judge who's like, oh, because you're such a bad person, I have to kill my son and you're making Jesus cry. It's so much more than that, that this power of sin, this power of darkness has twisted our existence so much that we cannot do it. And that breaks our relationship with God. Now, God cannot God cannot tolerate that which is against his will. And sin is against his will. That darkness is against his will. And at the same time, God cannot tolerate to be apart from us, because his love for us is so great, so mind-blowingly great, that he can't stand to be apart from us. And so that's where Jesus comes in. Jesus comes, lives, dies, takes the curse, takes the wages of sin upon himself willingly, and dies, paying that price, overcoming death, and then through his resurrection beats it in a way that we don't get, that we don't understand, and yet those promises are there. Those promises are real, and we cling to those, even when we don't get it, even when it goes beyond our understanding. We cling to the promise that Jesus has made, that you will be with me in paradise. That's the gospel. That's what's going on here. And so if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. I love that phrase. It only occurs here. Make you free occurs here, and then earlier on, what do you mean by saying you will be made free, or the truth will make you free? That only appear in any of the Gospels. It only appears right here in John, and right here these couple of times in this short passage. The only other place where it occurs is in some of Paul's writings in the book of Romans, when he's talking about in the end times that God will make this reality, will remake this reality. That's the only time that appears again within the Greek. And so it's a very similar theme there. That's a lot of what's going on in this passage, in this very brief, short passage. So much is going on. That's what I love about Scripture. That's what I love about John's Gospel in particular. So much is happening. I hope you have found this helpful. If you have questions, comments, thoughts, I feel like I've been talking about a mile a minute right now and dumping a lot of stuff in this brief amount of time. So if you have other thoughts, things you're wondering about, things that you'd like to point out, please share those down in the comment section. Also, check out last year's video. Again, it's episode 21 if you want to gain insight from what I was thinking about a year ago, and we can continue the conversation in the comment section down below. Love to hear from you when those pop up. Otherwise, I hope you have a blessed week. Happy Reformation, and we'll catch you next time. God bless.